สวัสดีครับ I'm Point from Contemplating. This weekend I had actually planned to release another video in which I talked about a pretty abstract concept, which was my reflection on or my thoughts on how the practice of meditation and the practice and study of psychology can benefit us greatly on our path to personal development and self-actualization. But the reason why I decided last minute to not release the video is because it was quite abstract in nature and I did not want it to be open to misinterpretation or misunderstanding. Which brings me to a different topic which I want to share instead today. If you'll notice, we all have a different perspective on things in life, right? No two people share exactly the same value system, same outlook on life, or same perspective. And that has to do with the way in which our brain or our mind processes information. It has to do with our belief systems and the tendency to interpret events and give meaning to experiences in a way that confirm and conform with our pre-existing beliefs and experiences. Now, in psychological language, this is called a confirmation bias, which is one type of cognitive bias. So let me put it this way. As a living organism, we, as a human being, and as a living organism, as an animal, we have to survive, correct? And therefore, we have to navigate through our environment. We have to be able to make decisions, make predictions, and navigate through the environment in order to engage in our survival needs. Now, in each and every moment, there is actually so much data that is being perceived by your bodily organs like sight, hear, smell, feel, etc. Right? You have visual input, you have audio input. Of course, the brain cannot handle and process every single bit of data out there. It has to make certain assumptions, otherwise, it can't handle every single bit. For example, I'm filming this video right now. I have to be concentrated on looking at the camera. I'm not really aware of what's on the left side of me or behind me or on the right side of me because my full attention and focus is on the camera. So the brain automatically selects and interprets meaning in a way that fits a mental model or mental picture that gives rise to an understanding about our environment and therefore our reality. Now, this mental model forms the basis of, our understanding of reality, correct? And there are many mental models you have, and which we can consider or call perspectives, attitudes, or belief systems, right? An example is how I believe about my country, the city I live in, my self-image, my self-concept, value systems, or anything else in between. Whenever we have an experience, we must interpret that in relation to what we already know, right? We have to have some frame of reference from which to build on our understanding of reality. But in doing so, we often mistake the map for the territory. We often buy into our interpretations, our viewpoints, our perspectives to the point where we simply believe and feel it to be true, when in fact it is just merely an assumption that you hold, a belief that you hold. Now, isn't that interesting? I want you to think about that for a moment. And for this very reason, is actually why I decided to not release the video last minute, because I felt it was too abstract and I was not very clear in my communications on many of the points that I talked about. I apologize for the sound in the background. There's a truck going by selling fruits and vegetables, I think. Anyways, back to our conversation. So the way in which we live our life, we always live our life through a mental model of reality. This mental model can be, given the analogy or compared to, say, a lens that we wear, right? Everybody has a certain lens or a pair of glasses which is colored in a certain way, and that forms the way in which they see things, perceive things, and understand, say, other people, understand, say, their country, who they are, their family, their relationships, their position in their job, anything else in between. So you can begin to see why no two people hold the exact same perspective or belief on a given issue. It is highly unlikely if you really dive down into it deeply. So that's really worth considering, because it leads us to become humbled when we self-reflect on our sense of reality. In other words, we do not see reality for what it simply is. Now, this is similar to the video that I just shared from my Thrive with Point Facebook page. We do not see reality for what it truly is, but we always see reality through our subjective view on things, through our subjective interpretations on things. For example, and I've given this analogy many times before, say I have two people sitting in this room right now where I'm in. One person can feel that perhaps the room is nice and cool and lovely, and the lighting is quite beautiful, the air conditioning is very nice, the temperature is just right for them. Somebody else can feel perhaps that the room is too small, the air conditioning is not working hard enough, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, and it's frustrating. So in that regard, what is objective reality? What I'm trying to show you is there's none. It's reality as seen through your subjective lens, your subjective understanding and perspective, which is why everybody in the world has, there's such a big diversity of value system, of ethics, of understanding in how to navigate relationships, etc., you name it. Navigate through each and every domain of life, whether it's relationships, work, what you think is right or wrong, you name it, right? So the example I gave, two people in the same room, shouldn't it be considered that they are in the same reality, right? But they're not. They're in their own bubble, which is a result of how they interpret their environment, their experience, their understanding of reality. Maybe one person has a tendency to look at life through a negative perspective, what we call a negative confirmation bias, right? That person that I just gave the example of is the one who would say, this room's ugly, this room's too small, the air conditioning is hot. Whereas somebody else who tends to see things through, say, a more positive bias, a more positive outlook, a more positive lens, would say the room's just right. The temperature is nice, the air conditioning feels nice on their skin, the lighting is perfect, the decorations are nice, etc. Right? We live through our own subjective reality. But isn't it interesting, though, if you really consider it deeply and dive into how we understand life and how we understand our reality? If you think about it, everything is processed through thoughts, through our thinking mind. And these thoughts can be, can be clear in our awareness, or just assumptions that we hold in the back of our mind that are just sitting below the radar of our conscious awareness. But thoughts, by definition, are concepts. They are assumptions, right? Person A's view that this room is ugly, too hot, uncomfortable is a result of his or her interpretation, thinking, and perspective on the room. It is a result of their subjective position. right? So the way in which we relate to reality is always through our conceptual understanding of it. Now, isn't that interesting? We mistake the map for the territory. And to briefly touch upon my meditation experience, or what I have learned or studied about it, or the theoretical understanding of it, or at least my understanding of it, is everything we see, we automatically label an interpretation on it. For example, you cannot look at a car without immediately thinking about the color of the car, the brand of the car, right? The size of the car. You cannot look at a tree without labeling it as a tree, without putting an interpretation or a conceptual judgment on it per se. And the interesting fact is that we feel that we know it for what it truly is, when actually, if you think about it, we don't. We always see things through interpretation. And that is food for thought today, because the way I want to present this topic, which unfortunately I just thought of just now, because this is being filmed last minute before the video is being posted, is to get you to appreciate that each person has their own different subjective understanding, and therefore that we see things through our own bubble, through our own perspective, through our own lens. And therefore, to be humbled and to understand that this is a cause for a lot of the conflict out there, right? Because two people have different positions on things, and because of their attachment to that position, this leads to conflict a lot of the times. In other words, a lot of conflict is just a result of differing opinions, not really because there's something serious at stake per se, right? So that's what I want to share in today's video. Just really think about that and really appreciate that, and try to notice how actually it is very difficult for us to try to truly put ourselves in somebody else's perspective, in somebody else's shoes. Because when we think we understand them, when we try to understand them, oftentimes we're doing so based from our own experience, from our own judgments, values, interpretations, perspectives, and beliefs, from our own shoes. We always have our experience and our own view on things as a frame of reference, which we use to think and try to understand somebody else, when in fact that's not truly understanding somebody else. This is similar to what I talked about in last week's video, understanding versus judgment. See how they're all related, right? So in other words, just try this thought experiment for yourself. Really contemplate on it and think about this. How isn't it interesting that, number one, we see things through our own subjective understanding, through our own interpretations, thoughts, and perspectives, attitudes, and beliefs. And number two, that therefore this is actually mistaking the map for the territory. We actually mistake true reality or ultimate reality for what it truly is, because we're always seeing things through our interpretation. Even if you look outside and look at a tree or a building or a car, you always add a conceptual interpretation to it immediately. Number three, appreciate how attached we are to our own perspective and our own position. And number four, see how when you try to put yourself in the mind of somebody else, or through the perspective of somebody else, or in somebody else's shoes, how actually that is a lot easier said than done. It's actually quite difficult to truly try to understand somebody else who, say, has a differing opinion than you, differing value than you, right? And notice the attachment that you have to your perspective, to your position, to your belief, and notice the attachment that they have to theirs. And I think we can learn a lot about our human mind and the nature of our human experience. So I wanted to talk about this today. Again, I'm sorry if it's not quite well structured, because I just planned this literally right now. So next week I will see what video I want to do. Maybe I might build on this topic about mistaking reality for what it truly is. In other words, mistaking the map for the territory. We'll see. Thanks for staying tuned. I'll see you next time. สวัสดีครับ